Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Wandering Road podcast. I'm your host Chris, alongside my co-host Dean. And for today's episode, we are going to be covering some stories submitted by my wife's aunt, who's had quite a few paranormal incidents occur throughout her life. She submitted all of these stories to me a few weeks ago. I've been compiling them together. And so, if you're listening, thanks for sharing these stories. And we're excited to get into these today. So, here's the first story. From a very young age, I was deathly afraid of the dark. I know most kids are, but mine was extreme to the point where my mom noticed that I would pull my covers up over my head and make a hoodie. While getting tucked in every night, she would ask if I wanted my hood on. Also, we had a fridge in the basement that contained the chocolate ice cream that I'd like to have a bowl of every night before bed. 9 times out of 10, I could talk my brother into going to get it. But there are those times where he would refuse, I would venture down by myself. Let's say I mastered the art of turning on every light on the way to the fridge and turning them all back off on my way back in seconds. I always felt like something was watching me, lurking in the dark. Fast forward to Christmas when I was about 11 to 12 years old. Santa brought me a Ouija board. Oh boy, it's our favorite thing. It always starts with that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I never asked for one. I was surprised to see it. Never really messed with it. It just sat on the shelf in my closet for years. I got married to my first husband in 1987. While we were on our honeymoon, my parents moved all of my stuff into our new apartment. Unpacking, I find the Ouija. Okay, mom really did pack all my stuff. Stuck it on the shelf, never messed with it. That marriage ended within a year. Not sure how many times I moved after that, but it was a lot. Every time I'd move, I'd leave the board behind purposely. Unpacking in my new place, there it is again and again until I ended up in a very small house in Monroeville. This is where it all started.
I think this is already being a good setup for for some creepy occurrences based off the structure of the story. But let's I'll pick it up too to kind of share a little bit of the burden of reading all this. I was thinking that I should probably let you know my path to religion as well. We were raised Catholic. Well, all of my siblings were. I was baptized and started CCD in first grade. I hated it. And just to take a quick pause for our listeners, Chris, what is CCD? Do you know? Just so we know.
Yes, CCD stands for Confraternity of Christian Doctrine, which basically it provides religious education for Catholic children. And
Oh, okay,
it's
interesting.
like used to refer to like religious education program. So kind of like
Okay,
another way of saying Sunday school, I guess, if you
makes
could
sense.
make a good comparison.
So picking up the story, I didn't feel comfortable in the church whatsoever. I would wake up with a stomach ache every Saturday morning. I maybe attended 4 or 5 classes until one Saturday morning I woke up with my usual stomach ache. My mom asked if I wanted to keep attending. Of course I said no, and I never went again. Never made my holy communion or anything either. I learned later that my mom lost faith in the church when dad had his first heart attack. I was told that the priest came to visit since they weren't attending mass, asking for their donation. The family was clearly struggling, but all they were worried about was the money. My mom never went back to church. And that's probably why I have no memories of attending Sunday mass, just the CCD classes. When I was 16 years old, my oldest brother was killed in a car accident. Mom totally lost faith in God and stated that she was a self proclaimed atheist. No religion was ever spoken about again after that. Over the years, I had many questions about God, but I never inquired about them. I would find myself in the woods thinking if there was a God, he would be here in what he created, not outside of it, not a man made building with a stained glass window. Fast forward to April 2001. My dad passed away. I really had questions then. I had a friend who I knew was religious. He had read the Bible. I went to him and asked him all of my questions, and he opened my eyes. He also bought me my first Bible. That's when I opened my heart to God and I asked him to come in. I was still struggling for many years after that to truly walk in his light. It wasn't until well after finding out my ex husband's secret that I achieved that. All right, Chris, I'll throw it back to you. You want to keep going on the story?
Yep. And it looks like we continue with the Ouija here. I'm living in this small house in Monroeville, PA. One floor, no basement. Lived there for 2 years without incident. One night I had a few friends over, played some drinking games. Again, I'm not sure how the subject comes up, but it does, and I dig out the Ouija. A few of us take it into the spare room, light a candle, and proceed to use it. Uh-oh. I know some people like Ouija boards. I've come across quite a few podcasts and episodes and stuff in general that they're like,
Yeah.
oh, Ouija boards aren't bad and all that stuff. I kind of get that. I guess it's just based off your perspective. But the whole concept and the whole ritual is just what freaks me out.
Yeah.
But continuing the story, don't remember what we asked it. All I remember is that the candle being blown out forcefully by something. It wasn't one of us. We all screamed and ran out the room. Soon after that, strange things started to happen. I came home one day to all of my kitchen cabinets wide open. Holy shit. Now these cabinets are real old school. The metal kind that clamps shut. You need to forcefully open them up. I did have a couple of cats at the time, so I explained it away. Even though I highly doubt a cat could open these cabinets, that happened quite a few times. Then I got infested with rats. I explained that away too. The neighbors a few doors down moved. They were slobs. I figured the rats smelled my dog and moved under my house. I came home from work one day to find my living room window covered in flies. The big ones. And I mean covered. You couldn't see out the window. I explained that away too. Recently rid the house of the rats. Maybe one died somewhere that I couldn't find, and that turned into maggots. Then flies. I had a flea infestation too. I lived there for 2 years with my dog. This infestation was bad, like overnight. I woke up with them all over me. I explained that away too. The neighbors that moved had a dog. Their fleas must have moved here. Then the night terrors started, or sleep paralysis. I know that's what they call it now. Never heard of it back then. The first time it happened, right as I was falling asleep, the twilight in between fully awake and fully asleep. I felt something or someone very large and heavy was on top of me. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream or even talk. It's fear like I've never felt before. Somehow I was able to will myself awake, went out, and slept on the couch. That happened a few times. All the while, I'm becoming a very angry person, a different person. I started fighting with everyone. I even ran over a pigeon on purpose. I was horrible. One night, I have yet another night terror. When it started happening, I told myself it was just a dream and it'll go away. Then I felt something grab me by the ankles, swing me around sideways on the bed, and started pulling my socks off. I was able to will myself awake. When I did, I was sideways on the bed with one sock off. This time I grabbed my essentials, packed up my pets, and hightailed it out of there. I never returned. I had my boyfriend and his dad move all of my things out. Yes, when I was unpacking in my new place, there was the Ouija board. I buried it once again in the furthest away corner I could find, not knowing that was probably the source of it all. I was just happy to be away from that house. So here I am in my new house, thinking I left all of that craziness behind, back with my first husband. All is good until we start trying to get pregnant. We're having trouble. Was it the added stress? I'm not sure. But the night terrors start once again. This time they happened in the middle of the night. I would wake up to the feeling of something very large on top of me. Can't move, can't talk. It takes longer each time. But I'm able to will myself awake. Still not getting pregnant, but the doctor tells me everything is in working order. The night terrors still continue. I met someone new who moved me to Beaver County, a real nice neighborhood, middle class, all brick homes. Neighbors welcomed us with pie. I thought I was in Mayberry. Things going well for now. I had a few night terrors, but they were few and far in between. We go to a local bar. The locals ask, what house did we move into? We tell them. Then they tell us a horrible story about a young couple who lived there back in the 70s. It's currently the 90s. There was alleged infidelity, and the wife shot the husband to death in the house. They had a son. He lives across the street with his grandparents. Wait, what? I thought I had moved into Mayberry. Turns out I moved into a Stephen King novel. Let's take a pause there, Dean. What do you think about these night terrors, dude? I'm kind of in between, like a mixture between night terrors and sleep paralysis, if that makes sense, because you're feeling the physical thing. Well, she felt the physical thing. And then when you wake up, you're the way that you moved in the dream, it's like it physically happened. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know, man. I've had stuff like that happen to me before too, where you're having a dream and you feel an interaction or something like that. And I think the weird part for my experience is whenever I do have something like that, if I hear a sound in my dream or I feel a sensation, then it seems like it always comes before the actual sensation that wakes me up or the sound. The one side of that conversation is, are we kind of going through a precognition thing where we're dreaming of the event slightly before it happens? But then the scientific explanation, which is in the same vein as like deja vu, it's like our neurons are firing in a way that it makes it seem like the thing is happening after the fact, but really happened at the exact moment that, like, right before we realized the sensation happened. So it'd be so cool to talk to her about that if it was ever possible. But that's what I think of first. If she's waking up though, where like she is in a different position and her sock is like, off or being or something happened that's physically different on her body that maybe she couldn't replicate herself, which I think in that situation, it seems, that's what's going on, then I would say that there's some really weird stuff going on. Ultimately, though, in this story, the crazy thing to me is all this started. It seems like whatever she did with the Ouija board put her in this groove of time where, how we talked in the past before about like your cousin messaging you or calling you about how he's sitting outside your old haunted house and you just happen to be having a conversation about
On
that
the
with your
podcast.
was your
Yeah,
sister. Yeah,
yeah.
so, like, it's like
Yep.
for him to be there in that moment, there had to have been, like, a cross like, it's not like he suddenly just popped into existence outside your house. So, like, he had to have traveled there while you were getting ready to have that conversation, and it had to, like, line up. So, I think the same thing is happening here, like, she had something happen with the Ouija board that put her in a groove that set her on a path that she was stuck in, that kept leading her down these paths, and then she ultimately ended up in this house where like, "Oh, by the way, someone was murdered here." Okay,
Like
well,
a
how did
fucking
that
Stephen
happen?
King murder
Like,
house, right?
it's not like she knew that she was gonna go to a murder house, like, she thought she was on a
Right.
good path, and she was surprised to find out that she was still stuck on that shitty path of, like, paranormal, so that's the thing that jumps out to me the most about this story so far.
Right, yeah, I think the main constant here is the Ouija. It sounds like the night stuff started after the use of the Ouija board. And to be honest, dude, like if I used a Ouija board and try to play around with it and then something just randomly blows a candle out, yeah, I'd fucking freak out too, man. Like I'd probably break and run. I don't know if I ever told you this, but on campus at Duquesne, how I used to live in what the hell was it called?
Brodier?
Brodier, yeah, the apartments for upperclassmen and grad
Yeah.
students. There was one night I fell asleep with all the lights on and I had the TV on in the background and everything. And you remember those dinky fucking twin size mattresses they had us sleep on? I had my bed up against the wall. So I was laying against the wall and I had this dream that something was like pulling my leg. And then I wake up with my like half my leg off of the bed and I'm like laying diagonally when I didn't lay that way. I like laid down like wrapped in blankets, like cocooned in a
Mhm.
fucking blanket. I can resonate with that. For the listeners, when this was submitted, there were parts that she submitted to me prior to continuing the initial stories in general of what she experienced. There's some other bits and pieces that will be included before the main story continues. If that is that a good way of putting it, Dean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, so I'll toss it to you for this piece here, my friend.
And before I pick it back up, we should have mentioned this in the beginning, but it's not a big deal. We're reading pretty much verbatim, and obviously this isn't our story, so but just know that we're reading it verbatim, pretty much. When I was real young, before elementary school, I remember sitting behind an end table in our living room and somehow projecting myself to other places. I'd close my eyes and I'd be across the street, standing next to a telephone pole, looking back at our house. I tried several times to go to other places, but I'd always end up next to that telephone pole. Once I started elementary school, I couldn't do that anymore. I tried, but it wouldn't work. I learned many years later that a neighborhood kid lost his brakes on his bike coming down Clay Drive, a very steep hill. He didn't hit that telephone pole. He hit the corner of a brick house that was right next to it and died. My mom said she was the first one on the scene. Never put two and two together until just now. Did that have something to do with my out of body experience? I don't know. Very weird. Jeez, that's man, that's such a crazy story.
That's a heavy one.
Yeah, it's something my mom said to me the other day that I like raised my eyebrows and sparked some intrigue was she's like, "Did you know that there are still brain cells in my head that are connected or like left over from the cells in your body, like when you were in my body?" I didn't fact check that. I think it's true. It sounds true. Like when you are in your mother's womb for 9 months or whatever, there are parts of you, like your cellular structure, that remain in her body. It just jumped out to me. I didn't put two and two together until now either, because when my mom said that, I can relate to this story because she's saying in this story that her mom was the first on the scene. Could be a conversation there about like quantum entanglement or something metaphysical going on, to where her mom experienced this poor little boy's body, presumably, or really, damaged body or whatever. The shock of that probably imprinted in her mind. And then the fact that she's having these visions at a young age, standing across the street by this pole near where the boy died and seeing her house, like that's so interesting.
Oh, that's a really good point, and I've actually heard that too. I thought I read that somewhere,
Mm.
that there is some sort of leftover cells or something. Maybe some sort of psychic connection, consciousness type of connection that
Yeah.
people are able to develop.
And before I continue, I'll say too that like nowadays, even within the last year or so, we've been learning more and more as a race of humans collectively about like quantum entanglement, and the idea that a subatomic particle could be inextricably linked to another one across space-time and like another part of the universe, and a reaction on one would elicit a reaction on the other. And then you have people like theorizing, well, if all electrons in the universe that we've studied look exactly the same and there's no distinguishing factor that makes any electron different from another electron, does that possibly mean that there's only one electron in the entire universe and we're just experiencing it as a mirror? I know it's getting too scientific-y, like, nerdy there, but like there's definitely a conversation to where we can start crossing over more and more the scientific route with what we're learning about the metaphysical world, or like the subatomic world, with the possible metaphysical world of like religion and all these experiences that people like are having with psychic abilities and astral projecting. Like there might be something more there and I think it's coming out from this story, this example, especially the one about the poor little boy across the street and, seeing her house near where that happened. Continuing the story, she's going to pick up the story back in the murder house that she had moved into in the 90s. So here I am, living in a murder house. You can still see the blood splattered stains throughout the paint, which is okay. Pause break. That's weird. That's crazy.
Well, that's
Why?
crazy.
if it was a murder scene, like usually, I mean, I don't know what in a small town in Pennsylvania in the 70s, I guess the CSI crime scene thing didn't they didn't clean up the scene. That seems very lazy to me. Whoever owned the house or like who got it after was like, it's fine. We don't need to paint over everything.
Just put wallpaper over the blood.
Jeez, man. That's so crazy. Okay. Everything seems normal. A few night terrors and paralysis, but nothing I can't manage. Until one night, we have some friends over, and this is right after the bar closes. One of these friends is named Amy. She has long red hair. I'm not sure why that's pertinent to my story, but I guess her hair seemed to fit her. She happened to be a medium, a psychic, and a tarot card reader. Great. Your favorite things, Chris.
We got the trifecta.
Whatever you want to call her, she would read our tarot cards at the bar, and damn if she wasn't spot on with them. Sitting around the kitchen table, drinking, bullshitting, and the subject of my murder house comes up. Someone had the bright idea to use a Ouija board to see if we could contact the victim. I refused to go get it. I told them that I don't like it. I have to ask her though. I would ask her at this point. I'm like, well, if you don't like the Ouija board, that's cool. But like, why do you still have one? It's like she kind of like, as a backup, maybe like this, this created the shit storm that I'm in now, the shit storm I'm in now. So maybe it can get me out of the shit storm at some point. So she's basically not throwing away, the possible last bastion to reverse it.
it could be a possibility where the Ouija board or whatever came out of the Ouija board affects people subconsciously where they don't wanna get rid of it.
Oh, yeah.
So it's
That's
like, "Shit, here it is again. You know what? I'm just gonna store it with the rest of the crap that I have."
I think about those movies where, the person tries to burn the doll or throw away the thing and it just keeps
And it
coming
just
back
keeps
over
coming
and over
back?
again.
Yeah.
I know that's not happening here because she'd probably like that would be the first thing she'd mention, but I like your idea a lot because it's like there's something setting you in a groove or a path that's not only affecting your well, it can't just affect the external, it must affect you as a person because you are making the decisions subconsciously or consciously that are leading you down a path toward a certain direction. Like, meeting friends named Amy with red hair in a bar who can do tarot reading and they end up
And
back at your
wants to
house
use yeah.
and wants to use a Ouija board again. And it's like, it's not that Amy was like popped into existence to fulfill this destiny. It's like you were put on this path to get to that point. So let's see where it goes. So I told them I don't like it. I don't like the Ouija board. I have it buried. Before I even finish my sentence, Amy is up and out of her chair saying she'll go get it. She's never been here before. She opens the basement door and proceeds down the steps. I'm thinking, no way is she going to find it. I have it in the bottom drawer of an old dresser way in the back of my basement. 2 seconds later, she reappears at the top of the stairs with it. My mind is blown. I refuse. But a few others proceed to use it. Amy's calling the names of the victim. The planchette goes off to the board, off the board. They try again, off the board again. And if you're listening, and I'll take a pause if you don't know, the planchette of the Ouija board is that little like triangular thing with the glass piece that
Glass
is
piece,
supposed to
yeah.
it like leads you to the letters that spell out or the numbers that spell out whatever you're asking. Amy says that he's angry and he doesn't want to play. She packs up the board and puts it away.
Here we go again. It starts happening. Nothing to the extreme as the Monroeville house, but the night terrors happen more regularly. Things being moved around, strange sounds, doors opening and closing by themselves, dogs barking at the wall. Holy fuck. That's creepy. That is creepy. Which reminds me. So the apartment that my now wife, girlfriend at the time, we lived in 10 years ago, we had a two-bedroom apartment, one room. They call it the quote unquote den. So, funny story, my sister came with my parents for my graduation, and my sister ended up sleeping on the couch. But my sister told me, which this would happen frequently when I would be home alone with the cats. They would sit in the hallway and they would just stare at that room. It would be like midnight and I'd be up like playing PS4 or something, the early 20s. We had that type of energy. Uh, yeah, and my cats would just like sit there and just stare at that room. And my sister said that the night that she came to visit and stayed in that apartment, one of my cats, Diesel, he hopped up onto the couch, sat on the top of it, and just stared down the hallway towards that room and just started growling. You know, when cats growl where they like feel uncomfortable and they're angry and they're scared? He was
Yeah.
doing that for like 30 minutes and
Weird.
didn't leave that vicinity. The whole dog barking at the wall thing. I didn't have my dogs bark at the wall, but I had my cats growl at stuff, so creepy. But anyway, I started to change again, did things out of my norm. The relationship that I was in started to deteriorate, which was no wonder since I was different. However, I had no clue that I was the one who changed. I blamed him. He made me feel less than, like I was worth nothing. I move on to someone new. We move in together. Things were okay. Night terrors continued. Not as often, though. That relationship didn't last long. Out the door he goes. Nothing crazy happened in that house except for the fact of losing my dad and my soul dog, Grizzly, within a month of each other. 4 months later, 9/11 happened. Crazy year for sure. I would see things out of the corner of my eye quite often there. I remember one time I'm in the bedroom on the computer. My back is to my cat laying on my bed. I hear what sounds like someone sitting on my bed. As I turn to look, I see my cat jump about 3 feet in the air and dives under the bed. No one's there. The basement was old and creepy. My dog was afraid to go down there. I just felt like someone or something was watching me when I did go down. Not long after that, a family of raccoons moved in the floor between my first and second floors. They entered through a hole in the porch roof. I set a trap on the porch. They used it as a stepping stool to get into my porch roof. I never caught one of them. Raccoon piss drenched my ceiling. It was a matter of time before they fell through. I moved out. I moved into a small apartment behind Harmerville. Again, Ouija follows. I'm used to it by now and tuck it away. I didn't live there long before I started dating my last husband, which was back in Beaver County. I spent every weekend there with him. Wasn't in the apartment much. I just know that I hated being alone. I couldn't wait to get out of there. He asked me to move in with him. Of course, I accept as soon as my year's lease was up. I was out there and back in Beaver County. We're living in an old trailer on a nice piece of property. I'm happier than I ever been. I left the Ouija in that apartment. I know I did. I was the last one in there and made sure. Or so I
Oh, here we
thought.
go. Here we go. Here's what we
This
said
damn
earlier with what
thing,
happened in the
this
movies.
damn Ouija. It's
It's gonna
following
pop up
you.
in your yeah.
Dude, that's so creepy. That is so creepy. Like, the thing that gets me the most, the planchette flying off of the board,
Yeah.
and then the friend saying, like, I don't the spirit's like, "No, I don't wanna play right now." Like, that's so oh, okay, I
I would
got
be I
goosebumps.
if it were me, I would be more focused on the fact that, Miss Amy had never been to my house before and she
For
knew where the Ouija
right?
board was in the basement.
The basement?
Um, I I feel like at that point, I wouldn't even be like I wouldn't be thinking like paranormal. I'd be thinking like, "How did you get in my house before? Like, you've been in my
Like,
house
how do you
clearly.
know?
This is a security threat." Um, you've been rummaging in my house when I'm gone, I think. I'm sure, things were seen that were inexplicable with the planchette flying off, but I would probably think that if Amy was handling the board and she already knew where it was, she already had something in mind. She knew the names of the people who were murdered in this house. Like, she must have been in this house before. Like, I wouldn't think paranormal. I would think like she's setting me up for something, but it
Or
looked like it didn't plan it.
if you recall, she said that Amy was a psychic, and
Yeah,
according to
yeah.
her, like, Amy
Mm,
never been there before. So,
right.
even if Amy was there before with other people that have lived there previous to Aunt Sue living there,
Mhm.
how would Amy know where he put the Ouija board?
Yeah.
Because it
And
was
again,
somewhere specific, right?
yeah. I'm just gonna be clear right now. I guess if I knew the person, if they had been at the bar, and I had been there with them over and over again, I felt like I knew them pretty well. I guess I wouldn't immediately kick them out. But if I had a stranger in my home, just for one night, like just coming over with some friends, and they knew exactly where something was, I would be like, please leave. I know, like, you've been here before. You've been rummaging through my things. I'm not saying that the woman wasn't psychic. I'm not saying that something supernatural wasn't happening, but I'm just sharing that that would be my very first thought in that crazy situation. Even if it was paranormal, even if it was psychic, I would have to ask her like how she knew that. But that's what popped out to me
But
about that
I mean,
story.
would you think, like, if you see that happening live,
Yeah, the
like,
planchette flying off and stuff. Yeah,
even, like, the person just going and getting it, I
yeah,
wouldn't I would kinda be, like, in a state of shock, like, "What the" like,
oh sure,
"Okay, you got it."
yeah.
Like, I guess we're doing this type of thing, so I would always take into consideration, like, how would I react in that type of situation? I'd probably react in the same way out of some type of
Go along with it.
curiosity. Yeah, but
Yeah,
also to take into consideration the effect of the Ouija board,
sure.
how that could always have some sort of effect.
Okay, here we go. Continuing the story. There wasn't enough room for all of my things in his trailer. I put some of it in storage. Went there to get my Christmas decorations at one point. Guess what I found in one of my Christmas totes? Yep, the Ouija board. It followed me. I know I saw it on the shelf in my last apartment when I left. I'm too happy to worry about it. I'll figure out a way to get rid of it later. Christmas was great. The new year was looking good. Todd's mom is in and out of the hospital, but it doesn't seem that it's serious until it was. We get a middle of the night phone call. She's in the hospital again. Doesn't look good. She passes away that day. I was glad that I was there for him. A few months pass. Then one night, Todd jumped straight out of bed screaming and yelling. I couldn't make it out. I told him to just go back to bed. The next morning, I asked him if he remembers scaring the shit out of me in the middle of the night. He says yes, drags me outside, points to an 80-foot maple tree, and proceeds to tell me that he had a nightmare of that tree falling on the trailer and crushing it. I'm sure you can guess what happens next. A couple of months later, Todd's at work. I'm vacuuming the bedroom. There was a small thunderstorm coming through, nothing major, but we had a lot of rain. The ground was totally saturated. When I hear a boom and then a crackling sound, I turn off the vac. And at that split moment, I knew exactly what was happening. That tree was falling over right towards the trailer. I turn and I start running down the hallway towards the front door. As I'm running, I can see the shadow of the tree following me out of the corner of my eye. As I reach the front door, crash! The tree crushed the trailer from the bedroom up to the living room. The way this tree fell is a blessing. Besides the base trunk, it had 3 trunk-sized branches that were in an A shape. If the top of the A branch came down first, I wouldn't be here. The bottom of the A, those 2 came down first and sort of framed the trailer. So hard to explain without drawing a diagram. So I hope you understand what I'm saying, right? Anyways, the living room and the kitchen were spared, along with the lives of me and my fur kids, of course. Thank goodness. I called Todd immediately. All I said was, it happened. He knew exactly what I was talking about. The tree fell, right? Yes, it did. Get home ASAP. We tarped off the crushed part and lived in the other half until we purchased a modular home. The night terrors got worse. I began to realize that maybe stress caused these. I chalked it up to that. Tarot reader Amy, oh, she's still in the mix, shows up at our door. She heard what had happened and wanted to check on us. Haven't seen her since the murder house. Before she leaves, she says she's so happy that I got out of that house and she no longer reads tarot cards. She didn't go into detail, but she said it had gotten real bad after that house. It forced her to quit doing readings. We tear down the trailer. Yep.
There you go.
Yep. Tarot card madness. We tear down the trailer, live with his dad for 3 months while it's being excavated. Night terrors keep happening more and more. We move in on January 2004 to the modular home. Happier than ever, and the night terrors dwindle. We got to talk about this for a second. I mean, this is crazy, right? So you're not just talking about one person having some kind of night terror or like foresight and then it happening where
Or
it's kind of like
precog,
closed
right?
off. Yeah, it's like if it's one person, it's closed off in a bubble. But the fact that her significant other is having this dream and then it's being fulfilled later on, that's substantial. You don't just dream of something happening that specific and then have it happen and you don't think twice. Probably the craziest part of the story so far.
Right. Yeah. And the fact that Miss Amy ditched tarot cards after
Yeah, I
sounds
wonder
like
what the
that
story with that
Ouija.
was. Like, I
Yeah.
wonder she just said it got bad, but, like, I don't know what that means. I would like to know, like, oh, man, why how did it get bad? Did things follow her home? Probably, maybe, and she just like, "Oh, I can't do this anymore. It's getting too serious. I'm starting to see inklings of attachment and negative things happening to me." So, like, maybe she had to distance herself from that.
If I had to take an educated guess, I would say whatever was in that home, person that passed away, or when they were playing with the Ouija, there's always a possibility that when you're playing with the Ouija board and you open that portal, negative entities can pretend to be what you're trying to contact. So maybe Amy had, in good faith, actually tried to contact the victim that lost their life in that home, but maybe she opened the portal to something else. And
Yeah.
when they stopped playing the game, who knows if, they did proper procedures. Like, I wasn't there, so I can't speculate that they didn't say goodbye or anything like that. Maybe they did. Maybe Amy did say goodbye. Or maybe it was one of those things where the portal wasn't closed properly. Or if the portal was closed properly, the thing was powerful enough that it decided, you know what? I'm not leaving. You're psychic. You can see me. You know what you're doing. So I'm going to attach myself to you. But who knows? Can't really tell. That's just my
Yeah.
educated guess. With all the Ouija board stories that we covered so far, that would be my educated guess. There was some sort of attachment, like we talked about with Roland Doe. Who was that other girl that we talked about in Spain? You remember that episode we did a while back where they were trying to contact their friend that passed away, those
Oh, yeah, yeah,
schoolgirls in the 90s?
right.
and all
Mhm.
that crazy stuff started happening that the neighbors saw. So maybe it was something similar that happened to Amy, and she was like, "You know what? I'm not dealing with this anymore." But the story continues. Night terrors dwindle, but still happening. I'm happy in my new house. Things are okay for a few years. Let me premise the next few years with the fact that I never did any drugs or other than marijuana and alcohol up to now. I find out he's been taking pills. No big thing. Seems to be a weekend thing. I let it slide. I get LASIK eye surgery in 2005. They screw up one eye. I have to wait for it to heal before they can correct it. That takes another 3 months. They have me on Percocet. I like the way it makes me feel. With his help, I become addicted. We both are. Things go downhill as can be expected. Night terrors get worse. My mom passes away in 2008. Things become toxic. Night terrors are at their worst. I'm watching Sylvia Brown one day and they're discussing Ouija boards. Sylvia says to burn it. I've always heard that you shouldn't, but Sylvia says it's okay. I take it out back to the burn pile. I burn it. Believe it or not, but I haven't had one night terror since that day. Things still weren't good, but no night terrors. Things got worse. As you know, I learn of my husband's secret. I spiral. I lose myself. No more night terrors, but I feel the devil after me. I try to run, move to another state, move here, move there, live out of my car. I really don't remember much from 2011 to 2015. It's all a blur. I end up back in freedom. I move into a small apartment under a bar. The bar is haunted. I used to bartend there when I first moved to Beaver County. I closed the bar at the time. I felt like I was being watched. Doing dishes after close, I hear the pool table, the quarter slot slamming, and the balls releasing on the table. I run out to see who's racking them up, but no one's there. While I'm living under it, I would hear all kinds of things. The dolly rolling across the floor, the jukebox playing things that weren't on the playlist. My digital clock has the temperature. Being it's a basement, it is cooler. However, my clock always reads 666. I would feel like I'm being touched. Sometimes I would feel a hot, heavy breath on my cheek. I dove deeper into my faith, started praying every day to get clean, asked God for his help. He did. I've been clean ever since. Asked him for protection from this building. Soon after, I was forced to move out. They were selling the bar. It was a blessing in disguise. I find the trailer that I'm living in now. Things aren't easy, but my faith is strong and my mind is clear. I'm stronger than ever. I'm finally happy again. And with God's help, I'm paranormal free. So that's my story. Can't help but think that I unleashed something all those years ago. It followed me, tried to destroy me. God won in the end, and I can't be more thankful. So there you have it, listeners. The stories from my wife's aunt. I hope you enjoyed listening to these stories and me and Dean talking about them today. It's great to get support from family with what you're doing. So, and she has been binge listening to our episodes. I think a couple weeks ago she was like in the 50s, but she messaged me today and she's like, I'm almost at episode 100. So that's freaking awesome. But I did ask her a question about like her night terrors and sleep paralysis because I had like a specific interest on that. And here is the response back that she sent me. She said that I would always wake up feeling something large, dark, and evil on top of me. I'm paralyzed, can't speak. I can open my eyes, but I can't see anything but darkness. There is always some sort of light in my bedroom, moonlight, nightlight, light from another room. But during these, there would be no light whatsoever, so I never saw anything. I just felt it. I was always able to will myself awake eventually. One time I remember trying to will myself awake. I was able to move one finger, and with everything in me, I tried to wake up Todd with one finger. It worked. I think he screamed, "Get the fuck out of here." I woke up, looked over at him, and he was sound asleep. I asked him about it that morning. He said he doesn't remember yelling, but he did have a nightmare. He said that he couldn't remember the details. All he knows is that he was trying to save me, but he couldn't. I said, "Did I die?" He said, "No." He just wasn't able to get to me. So that's in response to me asking more about her experiences with like the sleep paralysis and if her ex-husband at the time had any type of involvement. And then the last tidbit is she sent this to me a couple weeks ago that I decided to add to today's episode. She said something strange happened last week. The trailer park I live in is a dead end road. At the end, there is a dirt road that wraps around to the water plant that supplies the park. I walk Tucker, who's her dog, past that every day to go into the woods. At night, we take a short walk around the water plant and back home. It's very dark back there at night. I take a flashlight. The last few nights before this happened, Tucker was hesitant to go around the plant. He was scared of something. We'd go around, but he would hug my legs up until we get to the other side. Then he'd go off like normal. One night we did this, and as we're heading back up the dirt road, here comes someone riding on a bicycle with no lights, no reflectors, black hoodie on. I turn my flashlight on him and say hi. He rides right by me and Tucker, never said a word, and looked away. He rides right down into the woods and disappears. I haven't seen anyone riding bikes in this park, let alone at night with no lights. When I turn off my flashlight, you can barely see your hand in front of your face, let alone ride a bike into dense woods. That freaked me out a bit. Then a couple of nights later, we walked around the water plant. Tucker is a little hesitant, but not as bad. We round the corner, and I turn and point my flashlight down the path we normally walk during the day. There is a red glowing ball about 30 to 40 yards down the path. I'm like, what the hell is that? It's about 3 to 4 foot off of the ground, hovering. I turn to see where Tucker is. When I look back, it's gone. I start walking. I turn to look again. There it is again. I start saying the Lord's Prayer and it disappears. The next day, when we go on our daily walk, I look everywhere where I saw that glowing ball. There's nothing that is reflective at all. Maybe an animal, but why just one eye? And a big eye at that. I would have to say that what I saw was about the size of a tennis ball. Just really strange. That biker really freaks me out. Tucker saw him too. Went right up to him as we were passing us. The person on the bike never flinched. It was like he didn't see us. And how the hell was he riding a bike in the dark? Cue the theme from the Twilight Zone.
All of these stories, as we mentioned earlier, they seem to stem from the strange alignment of the introduction of the Ouija board. And then she has this literal, like this very literal come to Jesus moment where she prays to God and everything kind of realigns. And man, I got to tell you, like every time we hear stories like this, I know I probably sound like a broken record, but it bears repeating every time because it becomes more and more obvious to me. It's not just like you're opening a portal to something and it's attaching itself to you. I think you're literally inadvertently placing yourself in a stream of existence in which you can't swim out of. I don't know what force it takes. I'm not going to sit here and say that like, oh, there's only one way out, and that's like, the Christian faith or something. I mean, I think what probably in my mind is happening is if you're giving power to something you see as good in the universe, and you're asking that thing for help, because there's probably all sorts of people across different religions who are reaching out to other deities or structures or whatever in other religions who are getting out of this negative groove that they've been put into. But I think that there is something there to say, there's something wrong. You're seeing these weird events. You're seeing the number 666, which you believe is evil or a mark of evil. A lot of people do. So you're having all these things happen to you that are just negative, 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 including like precognition and almost dying from a tree falling you. Crazy. But the fact that she's reaching out into the universe for good, positive change and help, I think that can resonate with all of us. I think most of us who exist at one point or another have prayed or asked, like, please, like, even if you're not asking God you're not directing it at anything, you're at least saying in your own head, like, please let something positive happen, or please get me out of this. She's paying a belief into this asking that is coming through in a way that is ultimately leading her to a more positive, whatever you want to call it, vibration or frequency or stream in life. There's like so much to unpack and have a conversation on with that concept. And we don't have to do it now, but I just have to like put that out there that we should have that conversation at some point and really explore what that means. Like, I think that the tendency is to think that, oh, some demon attached to me and it's dragging me down this path, and it's only the demon's, presence that is making these bad things happen. But I think that that's not how life works. I think that, like, there are grooves in life that we get into and we can't get out of for some reason, and we end up looking at a clock when it happens to say 13, or we look at a thermometer that says 666 or something, or we have some dream that is clearly a precognition where a tree almost kills you like 3 months later. Like, all these things that are happening in those moments are so viscerally real, and they're inescapable, and but you have to know that there is an escape. And it's awesome that your wife's aunt found that escape from what was going on.
That's well said, man. I I think you hit the nail on the head right there. I agree. That is something that we should talk about.
And before we sign off for today, I have to bring up something that kind of happened to me. And because we're sitting here talking about weird occurrences, and, like, we have these thoughts about some things, and then, like, a couple days later, this topic we thought about privately comes up in front of us, and, like, this is another example. So, like, she just had this thing happen to her where she saw this biker in the dark that's inexplicable. Like, why is there a person biking through a dirt road at a trailer park in near pitch black dark going off into the woods? Like, I guess you could use your imagination, like, oh, maybe they're doing something creepy, or that's why they're not responding to her when she's saying hi or whatever. But something similar happened to me recently. If you've been a listener for a while, I live in Hawaii. But sometimes, like, in Hawaii, there's so many things to do, like so many places to go. So I was taking a drive one night recently, and sometimes I just like to drive around the island. And I was up towards the North Shore, coming back down to go south towards Honolulu, and by myself, just taking a cruise. And at that point, it was getting very dark out. Usually, I don't take a drive that late. I just happened to be out longer. It was a nice night. I was up towards the North Shore right when it was getting pitch black. And I was going down this road on the outskirts close to the ocean side. As I was coming around this bend, my car lights shined in this little grove, I guess you can call it, like this little grass offshoot that was right in front of palm trees. And then, like, behind the palm trees was like thick forest. So my car only hit this patch for maybe like 1.5 to 2 seconds before I turned again, and the lights refocused on the road in front of me. But in that moment, I saw a person standing with two dogs on a leash, but the person was wearing no pants and only a kimono over there. Like, it wasn't like a bathrobe, but it looked like an old Japanese kimono, and it was tied off, and I couldn't see above the shoulders. My lights just hit the shoulders and lower. So this person was standing there in this old school blue kimono, and they were with two dogs. And it was the crazy thing about this story was, just like what your aunt went through, it was pitch black. The person, whatever this person was doing, like, they were standing there in total darkness with two dogs. And I, like, first I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, oh, they're just out walking their dogs and they're just wearing like a night thing or whatever. But then I look back in my memory right after, I'm like, well, why would a person be wearing a silk looking kimono so late at night and standing in a portion of the grass, not near any homes, not near any sources of light, without any flashlight? They're just standing there with two dogs in pitch dark. And the first thing my mind went to after I saw that was like, oh, I wonder if that was like a Japanese ghost or something. Cause there's like a big, Japanese population here, and like the kimono and like the two dogs. And it kind of reminded me of like when you see old artwork from Japan where it's like the lone traveler with the dog or two dogs or whatever, and he's wearing traditional garb. And
Kind
so
of like our
again,
logo. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, so I'm not saying she saw a ghost or something, or, like, something supernatural. I'm not saying I saw something supernatural. I think what we're both saying is we saw some weird shit that should not have been happening in, like, darkness. It doesn't make any sense that a person would be
Right.
riding a bike in pitch dark, or
Pitch
someone
black.
standing there with two dogs, and yeah, it's just crazy, man.
Listeners, if you never been out to like the country or like heavily wooded areas in general, go there at night where there's no trail light. Take your flashlight, walk down a little bit into the woods, turn off your light, and see what you can see. I guarantee you won't be able to see shit in front of you. And that's the type of environment that she was in at the time. that is today's episode. I hope you enjoyed listening to today's stories. If you yourself or anyone you know have stories that they would like shared and we could read them and make them into an episode, we could keep you anonymous as well. Go ahead and reach out to us. This is probably one of my favorite things to do, Dean. Reading listener stories along with interviewing people about their paranormal stories. I enjoy when we have our one-on-one episodes where we pick a topic and we talk about it. But I think our meat and potatoes of our podcast is when people submit stories and we have guests on to share their stories. So I always enjoy those episodes and look forward to having those. Again, if you have any stories and you want to be on the show or you want to shoot us an email, we'll keep you anonymous. Go ahead and reach out to us. And we hope you enjoyed today's episode, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode of The Wandering Road. You can find us on Apple, Google, Spotify, and most podcast platforms. Be sure to subscribe and share. Also, don't forget to give a follow on Instagram at twroadpodcast and follow my TikTok at twrpodcast. Take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.